So welcome to Sangha Night. Thank you all for coming. And tonight, tonight is the second book launch that we've had this session, which is quite unusual. It's probably the second one in several years, but it just happens to have come within a couple of months of the first one, which was Dana Priya. So this is my book. It's a book that I've been writing for a couple of years. And so what's going to happen this evening is that Tejodharini and I are going to have a conversation. She's going to ask me some questions about various things to do with the book. And then there'll be a chance for you to ask questions if you have any, if there's anything that comes to mind while we're talking. Then there'll be a little break. Maybe a few announcements after that. We won't have breakout rooms this week, and then I'll lead a meditation. And then the final thing that will happen is, as usual, Jayaratna will lead us in the Dhammapalam Gata. So Vajradevi is going to screen share Tejodharini and I. So if it doesn't show up on your screen, I think you just need to put us on speaker view. I think that's right. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. And then you should be able to see both of us. So over to Tejodharini, I think, to start with.
Okay. Well, it's great to have so many people here, and it's significant and it's auspicious that we've got such a lovely spring day to mark the publication of Vajradevi's book. So, how have you been celebrating?
I went for a bike ride. I cycled around Hormond Hill, and it was perfect actually. And then we had lunch in the garden, so it was a very simple day, nothing very different to many in the last year, but it felt quite grounding just to get out. Yeah.
Great. How does it feel to finally have your book published?
Well, it's felt very low key. I felt like I haven't really been able to anticipate, I was saying to Amritamati the other day, there are certain things I am quite happily able to say, oh, I'm looking forward to going on holiday, for example. Looking forward to the book being published, it didn't seem to sort of, it didn't seem to be like that. But I have, today has felt like, been getting lots of responses in from people via Facebook, via my blog, particularly, yes, and it's making me realize how many people already have participated in the book through the sponsorship of it, so which is how Windhorse sort of raised the funds to produce books. So I printed off. I don't actually have a copy of the book at the moment. There was a little delay in the printing. The colour didn't come back right the first time, so they had to use all their contingency time to get the colour redone. So in the absence of a book, I have a cover. So Uncontrived Mindfulness, Ending Suffering Through Attention, Curiosity and Wisdom. So that's the front cover, and then the back, it's got a little picture of me with lots of hair, lockdown hair, and a few of the comments from the endorsers, who said some very lovely things. So yeah, so I don't know, it feels pretty good at the moment. It feels pretty good, and but also a little bit exposing, a little bit like something I've been working on for, and I don't know how long it is, because it went to the publishers last April. So because of COVID, it was delayed. The publication was delayed. So I don't know, maybe it was a couple of years before that. So it might well be 3 years since I started writing it, which is is quite a long time in your life, really. Yeah.
When did you decide to write the book? What prompted you to start think about writing a book?
I'd wanted to. I think the myth of the writer is just really strong in me. So I think I probably have wanted to write a book for maybe 40 years or something. And even as a kid, I wrote lots of stories and so I think the first time I seriously sat down to write a book was in my late 20s, and that was very different. That was fiction. That was a detective story, and then throughout that time, in a way, the myth of the writer was still there, but I hadn't actually gotten down to take it any further than that book, that detective story, got as far as about a third draft, but it was still very rough. So I suppose I always thought I would write fiction, and that's what I did write until I started doing a lot of teaching of this particular way of practice, meditation practice that I've been writing about. Because I should say, for those of you that don't know, that the book is about meditation. It's a meditation book. So until I started to do lots of teaching, I then started to think this could work. This could work as a book. And actually, a friend who worked for many years for Cambridge University Press, she thought that I already had the structure within the topics that I covered through leading retreats. I already had an ideal structure, and I actually she didn't quite say there won't be much work. But in a way, that part of the work had already been done in terms of the basic structure was in place. So probably it wasn't that long before I started writing, maybe in the year or so before I started writing, I was thinking about this particular book rather than a couple of other ideas I had, but they were more sort of fiction based.
You said that this is a meditation book. Could you give us a brief description of, the type of meditation that your book's describing or trying to get across?
Yeah. So I can describe it in different ways. So it's linked to the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha's teaching on mindfulness. Well, it's an expression of the Satipatthana Sutta. But there are many, many different ways that the Satipatthana Sutta can be practiced. So this is one that's on the receptive side. Some of them are quite active. They involve quite a lot of quite strong effort. And this is much more a sense of settling back and relaxing into mindfulness or awareness. But I think what made it different for me, because I'd done quite a few, I tried different approaches through Satipatthana. And what made this different was it has quite a strong wisdom dimension. It brings, if you like, it brings mindfulness and wisdom together. So it brings, which makes it more of an insight practice. So in Triratna terms, it's, we've got the mandala of practice, which we've been looking at this session. And so I think it mainly falls into two of those five categories. So I think the method is that of spiritual receptivity. That's the way that the practice goes. But I think the fruits of the practice are more in the realm of spiritual death, that Vajrapriya evoked really beautifully a couple of weeks ago. There's probably a lot more I could say, but I'm sure it'll come out in different ways. Yeah, just to give you a taste for now.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. So there's been many endorsements of your book by people both sort of in Triratna and not in Triratna. And just a couple of the words they've mentioned associated with your approach to Satipatthana are refreshing and distinct, and that was Tejananda. Mindfulness, it certainly isn't, which yes, I can definitely relate to that. And
Was that
Vidyamala
Tejananda? Sorry, was that Tejananda? Muck mindfulness.
it isn't, yeah.
That's very Tejananda.
It's very Tejananda, yes, yeah. And Vidyamala describes it as a beautiful hymn to mindfulness. So I guess I was sort of wondering is how you first came across, or how you first approached the Satipatthana in this way. Was there some kind of initiating event, as it were, that sort of started you on this journey?
Yeah. Well, maybe I could, just say a little bit about my sort of personal journey.
Yeah.
To that, because you're right, there was an initiating event, but I think often we only realize it when we look back a little bit. But I suppose well, it depends how far back we go. We could go back quite a long way. Though actually, there was perhaps there's more than one initiating event as well, because the one that stands out for me was about 20 years ago, maybe, and I was supporting a retreat. I was on the team for a retreat at a place called Il Convento in Italy. So it's an old monastery, an old convent in Tuscany. And for quite a while, for those of you that aren't familiar with the name, for quite a while, I think in perhaps the 70s or early 80s, Il Convento was used for men to get ordained in, before Guhyaloka existed, where the men are now ordained. And then again in the 90s, the women's wing of the order used Il Convento before Akashavana came into being. So there were, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 women's ordination retreats set in the grounds of, there was an olive grove attached to this beautiful old building, hundreds of years old, maybe 500 years old, just a stunning building. Anyway, there I had one of my moments, and that was I had a terrible migraine. It was a point where I really didn't have any effective medication. So if I had a migraine, I just had days of very strong pain. And I was camping, and it was really hot. So I remember sort of lying outside with this terrible pain. I couldn't really get away from the heat because all the rooms were allocated. But I was reading this book. I was reading a book by Jack Cornfield called A Path with Heart. And he just described a way of practicing that I hadn't really come across before. It was, I suppose perhaps it's a way that in Triratna we're much more familiar with now, but then it wasn't really around, and it was a way of just being with your direct experience, being with what was happening. And what was happening for me at that point was pain, physical pain, and a really strong desire for that pain not to be there. And I read it, and I could see that it was describing something new that I hadn't come across before. And I think sort of what it amounted to was that it was saying, pay attention to whatever's predominant in your experience, to what's there. And I think up to that point, I'd been quite sort of literal, and I'd just tried to do whatever practice I was doing. So if I was doing the mindfulness of breathing, I was paying attention to the breath. If I was trying to do my visualization practice, then that's what I was trying to do. But here was a different message that was saying, attend to what's actually happening in your experience. Can you be with that? And so I thought, well, there was a double meditation just about to happen. And I thought, okay, well, I'll go and I'll do the first one. And I'll just sit with what's happening. And I ended up sitting for both of these meditations. I sat the whole evening, and the pain didn't go away. And that really surprised me because I felt so much better. That my relationship to the pain really shifted, and it was actually okay just to be there. So that was a really strong shift, and that was, I think, what put me on a path of what I call following my nose. Following my nose. For several years, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know that what I was doing was Satipatthana, but that's eventually what I started to look more into Satipatthana and saw that that's what I was doing. Yes. So that's what I did. I followed my nose, and different.
It took you to Burma following your nose.
That's right. That's right. And actually, I think that's the next sort of really significant moment. I mean, there were some very good things in between. And one of those things actually was starting to teach more and leading retreats. Vidya Mala and I led retreats together, which was just lovely. We were just really exploring what it was to this practice we were both really keen on. We were both quite experimental in different ways in how we were doing it. And then on a couple of retreats, we also had Sadhanandi, who many of you will know, the chair of Adhisthana and previous chair of Taraloka. So sometimes the three of us, and we were all ordained together, the three of us would be, really sort of creatively bouncing off each other. So that was one of the good things that happened in between. But yeah, then I decided to go to Burma because it was somewhere where I knew I could have quite a long retreat and it wouldn't be expensive. And that's what I felt I needed. I felt like I wanted to maybe go for 3 months and just practice. And I'd had quite a lot of input by this time. I'd had quite a lot of teaching. And I thought, well, I'll just go. And there was a bit of a myth around Burma for me. Family connections that I didn't actually know about at the time, but I felt very drawn to Burma. So I thought, well, I'll go, and I know that the method there is broadly receptive. It's not this really strident method which I'd encountered before with a Burmese teacher, which I knew wasn't going to work for me. So I went thinking, well, I'll just be able to get on with my own thing, really, having had all this teaching. And then I got there, and there was quite a buzz around the teacher, Sayadaw U Tejodharini, who at that point was probably mid-early 40s, so relatively new to teaching. And actually, in a way, the missing piece for me was this, in a way, the centrality of wisdom, mindfulness and wisdom working together. And it was very exciting, actually. It was a very intense period of practice, and it wasn't always easy at all. But it was very exciting, and I met some people on that retreat that I'm still in touch with today. One of the lovely things that we would do, because it wasn't a silent retreat, and quite a lot of the retreats, the meditation retreats that I'd been on, both within Triratna and outside of Triratna, were tended to be mostly silent or completely silent. And this one, it was probably about 90% silent, but you could choose when you talked. I mean, the idea was that you would try and be aware while you were talking. Something I think U Tejodharini is quite unusual with the idea of talking meditation. But quite often what would happen, it was almost like, what do they call it in Italy when you go promenading, and in Spain as well, paseo, when you go walking in sort of dusk. And it was a bit like that. So in twos, we would go walking and talking about the practice, talking about what we were learning or what was happening in our minds. And and that was really, really supportive to especially to enthusiasm and interest in the practice, because there was very little in the way of teaching. You got taught a practice, and then you had meditation interviews every few days in a big group. So you had to be quite sort of either quite courageous or quite determined, if you like, to say something, to get in there, and then you'd hear what the teacher said in relation to your practice. So it was also, it was quite exposing at times. So it wasn't much teaching, and those walks and talks, those paseo in the early evening were very, very enlivening and lovely part of my time in Burma. I've forgotten what I was going to say. Yes, so I guess that initiating thing, it was that retreat, that whole retreat, if you like, and that starting to see the value of what U Tejaniya was teaching and what it was adding to what the considerable amount of input that I'd had up to that point. And it was fun. It was good fun. When it wasn't absolutely awful, it was really good fun.
Okay, so this is a thread that obviously you followed when you came back from Burma. When was it you first started sort of leading retreats with this approach to Satipatthana?
So this was in 2007, first 3 months of 2007, and I actually was co-leading a Buddha Field Total Immersion month about 6 weeks or 8 weeks after I got back. I was doing it with Kamala Sheila, which was lovely. But Kamala Sheila, he got quite unwell at the beginning of the retreat, and was very keen that I, really take a front seat. It's not quite what you say, is it? But he wanted to take the back seat because he wasn't very well. But actually, he had far more experience than me, so it wasn't quite what I was expecting to do. And to be honest, I felt like I hadn't really integrated quite what I'd learned in Burma with the rest of my practice. So I think some of what I said was probably a little bit of a mishmash. But that was it, really. That was when I started to try to communicate something of what I'd learned. And it's just carried on through then. I think the first few years, I was working. I was needing to support myself, and I worked in the Cambridge Buddhist Centre for a number of years, and then but from maybe about 2010, I was just gradually being asked to lead more and more retreats. Kamala Sheila's ill health, unfortunately, was a little bit of a feature in that a couple of times he was not well, and I was asked to step into leading his retreats. So not such a good thing, not a good thing for him, but actually it was the start of me leading retreats at Rivendell, for example, which I've done for about 10 years now. Did I answer your question there?
So when you first started leading retreats, and certainly I've been on one of your Rivendell retreats. Well, I've been on many of your retreats, actually, and yeah, I just find them so spacious, and I find the whole practice very spacious. And I think the word you use often is settling back, or the term you use often is sort of settling back. And it's kind of like a mental and a physical thing, isn't it? It's just putting that space between yourself and whatever may be going on mentally or emotionally. Yeah, it's a very helpful approach. What sort of feedback were you getting from people who were on your retreats in the early days?
Well, I was getting quite a lot of requests to write a book.
Right.
You know. Yeah, because I guess it's quite a subtle practice, and I was getting that fed back, and people, a lot of appreciation and a lot of the breadth and the receptivity involved in the practice. Yeah, it was often very new. It was a new sort of approach, but actually very helpful. I think particularly when people perhaps like I had were used to using quite a lot of effort, and just found that that change of gear meant that actually a whole load of other things could be learnt, could be yeah, there was a whole different way of being with the mind, of watching what was happening in experience. But yeah, increasingly after I'd been teaching a number of years, it's like, please write a book. When are you going to write a book? Which I'd forgotten, actually. And when you asked me earlier, I'd forgotten that that was that. Yeah, yeah. So there's been quite a lot of interest, you know, from people who've been on retreat with me in the book coming out, which has been great. Yeah. Yeah.
So the title of your book is Uncontrived Mindfulness, Ending Suffering Through Attention, Curiosity, and Wisdom. So I'm intrigued somewhat by the term uncontrived mindfulness, because it seems to imply that there's a contrived mindfulness. Could you say something more about the title of your book?
Yeah. So I think it came about. Well, the uncontrived mindfulness as a phrase just came about completely by accident. I was leading a retreat at Vajraloka, and Tejodharini asked me to send some blurb to use in the program. And so I wrote about mindfulness being, yeah, I said sometimes it can feel a little bit stiff or added on. We can experience being mindful in that way. And I was contrasting that with this more receptive, more relaxed, uncontrived way of being. And Tejananda just sort of lifted the word uncontrived out of the blurb. And suddenly the retreat was called Uncontrived Mindfulness. Suddenly it was in the program. And it was born from there, really. And because next year, I think the following year, I'd thought maybe we could call it something different. And he said, no, it's your brand. It's your brand. So it sort of went from there. So that it seemed natural to call the blog Uncontrived Mindfulness. And then from there, the book, it's become, in a way, it's become sort of recognizable as, you know, what I offer on retreats these days. They're not all called Uncontrived Mindfulness, but that's the sort of, in a way, the sort of baseline of what I offer. Yeah.
Another term that you use is cultivating a beautiful mind. Could you say something more about that? I think it's a lovely description.
Yeah, so the beautiful mind is a translation of, or beautiful of Kalyana, this word Kalyana, which means ethically lovely, or skillful. So it has these qualities of loveliness, but of an ethical sense. Yeah, so, but you can take it to be any positive quality of mind, any skillful quality of mind. And so I've started leading retreats, which, rather than focusing, as I do in the book, on if you like, the 4 aspects of right mindfulness. I go into those on retreats, and I go into them, chapter 2 or 3, I think it is in the book, these different aspects of right mindfulness. In the Beautiful Mind, the model that I use instead of those qualities are the 5 spiritual faculties. So so that's going into, if you like, you've got mindfulness, wisdom, faith, energy, and the other one. Pardon? Samadhi. Yeah. Luckily, Vajradevi is here. Yeah. So if you like, if you like, those beautiful qualities of mind come out through uncontrived mindfulness. They come out through working with, when we work with spiritual receptivity and spiritual death, it's not that the other factors of integration and positive emotion or spiritual rebirth, they're not absent, but if you like, they're not the leading qualities. And with the qualities of the beautiful mind, if you like, there's awareness or mindfulness and wisdom, but you've also got these other qualities. And the one that's most implicit, I suppose, rather than explicit, is Shraddha, or faith. So in a way, it just brings out that the positive, the quality of the mind that experiences Kalyana qualities. It's a happy mind. It's a lovely mind. Yeah.
I also noticed that you tend to use the word awareness more than you use the word mindfulness. Perhaps you could say something about that.
Yeah, you're right. I do use awareness more, and I use them interchangeably. So I think sometimes just the sound of the word mindfulness just conveys receptivity, perhaps a little bit more than mindfulness, which we can associate with needing to do something. But I also use lots of other words, and talk about noticing or observing what's happening, and knowing. Sometimes just talking about knowing. One of the things that I use quite a lot, both in the book and my teachings. What is the mind knowing? What's the mind knowing in this moment? So I think it's quite nice actually to mix things up so that it helps with different nuances that the different words bring out, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a very subtle practice in a lot of ways. And I think the words that you tend to use do sort of evoke more of that kind of relaxed rather than a more active approach, which, while is quite tiring, I think the sort of receptive, settle back approach, in a way, it's allowing things to arise or kind of come to you, as it were. Yeah, great.
Yeah. Shall I say a little bit about the book and the chapters and just what's in it, just for...
Yeah, that'd be brilliant.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, as I said, I don't have a copy, so Tejodharini doesn't have a copy either. But I do have a draft, and I have got things like a contents list. So I can tell you maybe a little bit about. So there are different chapters, and they cover things like, well, what is mindfulness? What is awareness? So the first chapter is called The Natural State of Awareness. And then in the second chapter, I go into how we're aware. So one of the things with this practice is that we're less concerned with what we're aware of than the quality of mind that's observing or recognizing or being aware of experience. So we've got one chapter about how, and that chapter comes before the what we're aware of, because it's not unimportant. The objects of body, mind, clearly it's helpful to define, if you like, what the whats are. Yes, there's a couple of wisdom chapters. Chapter 4 is about right view. So having a Dharma view, a Dharma perspective that informs how we're aware. I go into that we can have a lot of different points of view. We're always coming from some sort of view in our experience. And as we practice the Dharma, then we gradually get more of a Dharma view or a Dharma perspective. But what I'm looking to do in the book is to, in a way, how to do that in meditation, how to, if you like, just set up quite a simple perspective that enables us to recognize experience from that Dharma perspective in the light of the Dharma. Then I've got the longest chapter in the book actually is one called The Cycle of Suffering. So this is about, in a way, what the mind, if you like, what we're working with. Our largest working ground is perhaps that of different responses of greed or craving or aversion or not wanting the experience that we're having. So I go into that. As I say, it's the longest chapter, but I've broken it up in different ways. There's a couple more which I won't go into, but then the last chapter is bringing it all together. So that's when I talk more about uncontrived mindfulness, the possibility of being aware of being aware. So being aware of awareness. I got some really helpful feedback early after the first draft, actually, from Jnana Siddhi, my editor. And she said she'd read my blog and she was contrasting the manuscript at the time with the blog. And she said, what's so lovely about the blogs is that you are writing about how you practice. You're writing about how you practice. And she said, what you want to do in the book is to show others how they can practice in this way, which is exactly right. It was exactly what I was trying to do. So one of the things that, one of the ways of doing that was each chapter has got a blog piece associated with it. So something about how I've worked in my life with the practice, because it's very much a practice that continuity of attention, of mindfulness throughout our lives, throughout different activities, through talking. It's very much that sort of practice rather than one that's mainly practiced on the cushion. So I've if there's time, I might read one of them. But there's moments of me being practicing in a supermarket or at the dentist undergoing dental surgery. There's one of the early ones was when I had a little holiday at the end of one of my Burma trips. It was incredibly hot. It was April, which is pretty much the hottest month. It's the month before the monsoons come. So I'd gone to the beach to have a little holiday at the end of my retreat, and I was trying to get to the village, and I basically had got lost, and it was getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And I could not work out where I was meant to be, and I was miles away from my little cabin at the other end of the beach. And so I wrote a blog piece just about when I was sticky, I was a bit grumpy, I was getting worried that I was getting burnt. There's all this stuff going on, and yet I could watch my mind. I could see all that happening in a way that wasn't that was uninvolved, if you like. The mindfulness was able to recognize what was happening, but not get unhelpfully involved in it and perpetrate it. So along with the chapters, there are blogs for each chapter. There are also various exercises, various ways of trying to make the content of that chapter to make it workable with, if you like. And then, there's recorded led meditations as well that go with each chapter. Yeah, so that's what's in it. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm looking forward to getting my copy through, as I'm sure many other people are as well. So it's 8:20. I've got no further questions at the moment. Thank you so much for responding in that way and telling us about your book and how you got to where you are now.
So if you just find a comfortable posture, however that is for you at the moment, whatever feels like it will support a spacious, kindly, open awareness. It could be lying down. It could be leaning against something. Or you might be in some sort of formal meditation posture. So taking time to come to formal practice. Perhaps just sit in a very ordinary, relaxed way, just for a minute or two. You won't necessarily have your eyes closed, though you might. But sometimes it can be helpful to start just with the gaze, perhaps downcast. Almost more reflective than meditative. A sort of coming to yourself, coming home. Not trying to do anything in particular. Just sitting, and present to whatever is happening within your experience. So one question that can be quite helpful is, what's obvious right now? Is it a particular body sensation? Are the sensations of the breath what feel obvious? Or perhaps you're drawn to particular sounds in your environment. So we're constantly being drawn towards things in our experience. The attention goes to one thing and then another, then another. A thought, a sensation, a breath. It can be like a butterfly on a leaf, just landing really lightly and then moving to something else, another leaf, a flower. And what mindfulness does is to follow those movements. We notice where the attention is going, and awareness accompanies that attention. Breath, body, sounds. It might be that your attention is mainly within the body. So then you might notice different sensations. There's some sense of temperature or tingling or pressure. Not needing to find words for these experiences. Letting the attention land wherever it does and accompanying it with awareness. And every now and again, just checking the quality of the awareness. Settling back, relaxing into awareness. Receiving different moments of experience, letting them come to you. And notice if you find yourself reaching out towards experience, to a sound or a sensation in the body. And just notice that reaching and seeing if it's possible then to settle back again. And there's no particular thing to be aware of. There's not one object that's better than another. Whatever the attention in the mind is knowing is good enough. If you find it helpful, you can just let your attention stay with one aspect of experience. Perhaps with body sensations or with the breath, for example. But if you feel quite present and relaxed. Just really let the mind notice whatever it's interested in, wherever it's going. Bring awareness to that. As you're practicing, appreciating your mind, appreciating the work it's willing to do. To simply be present to whatever is happening. Present to this moment, and this one, and this one. If you find your mind wandering, getting lost into stories, really appreciating that moment when you realize what's happened, when you wake up into awareness. No need to wonder about where you were or why you got lost or anything, but aware again, present again. What can you notice in this moment? And that noticing doesn't need a lot of words or describing. Those some words may come, but simply noticing, simply knowing, being aware is enough.